In the spirit of Halloween, paranormal or not, what is the scariest, creepiest or most unsettling experience of your life? I was about 12 years old and I was watching my little brother because my parents were out at work. I go to get something from the garage and I heard a whisper that said, "Come here." I flip shit and I grab my brother and go upstairs into our room and call my neighbor. We checked the house and there was nothing. I eventually knew that I was being a dingus, although the memory still creeps me to this day. I was about 10, and me and my siblings would play hide and seek a lot to pass time. My favorite spot was in my mom's closet behind her clothes because no one knew about it. I was hiding from my sister behind the clothes for some time and she comes into the room looking around. While she's over by the bed I hear a very faint whisper in my ear, "Could she see us?" My face instantly lost all blood in it and I ran out of the closet shrieking. I told my sister what happened so we went back to the closet to look around, just to find my brother laughing hysterically at me for screaming like a baby. He was on the other side of the closet before I hid in the first place. Probably won't live that one down. My fiancé and I decided to go camping. When we were getting the camping permit, we were told the first night we were staying was going to be packed with people, but the second night was going to be only us at the campground. One thing to mention is we always choose a campsite that has a single entrance that we can block off with the car for safety. The first night goes without a hitch. The second night rolls around. We were sitting around the fire as it started to die around 3 a.m. We're about 2 seconds away from going into the tent when a man with a headlamp on shows up and is trying to get around my car into our campsite. The headlamp shining at us blocked the view of the top half of his body. My fiancé walks up to see what he wants, and the guy asks if we hear the loud music playing from the bar down the road. My fiancé gets about a foot away from him, then does a complete about face and makes a beeline for where we have our gun, but doesn't grab it. I joke with the guy, saying, "Yeah, it's just great." He said, "If they're doing it to annoy me, I'll be set free. Do you understand?" I try to joke with him again, but he cuts me off and says, "No. If they are doing it to annoy me, I'll be set free. Do you understand?" I said, very clearly, "Yes, I understand." He says, "Good. That means no prison," and immediately walks away. I immediately call 911 as my fiancé hands me the gun while he literally throws everything unceremoniously into our car to leave. He tells me that, when he got close enough to see the man's face, his face was pure insanity, and that's why he turned immediately around to go for the gun. Right when we've finished throwing everything into the car, the police showed up. They said they saw the man leaving the campsite and asked him what he was doing. He said he was very upset about the music and was asking anyone he found nearby if the music was bothering them before he went to the bar to ask them to turn the music down. As semi-reasonable as this sounded, the cop said, he was not normal. There was something very wrong with him. "We're glad you called, and we were advised to leave the area if we were able to." It was the single scariest moment of our lives and we haven't been camping since. I take the public train, MARTA, to my university in downtown Atlanta. I usually take the red line to and from school, but this day I had to get on the gold line to go to a friend's house. As I'm stepping onto the train, this homeless-looking man on the other side starting waving his hands trying to get my attention. All I heard was, "You're getting on the wrong train. You always take the red line," and the doors shut and we took off. I've tried to convince myself that he was just being nice and didn't want me getting on the wrong train. It just really gives me the creeps that he knows my daily route and schedule, yet I've never noticed him. Years back when I was about 15, I was staying over my grandma's house with my brother. She had just moved into a newly built semi-detached house, and was the first one in the area to move in. There wasn't anyone else living in the area at the time. I remember one night I was alone in the kitchen playing Pokemon on my Game Boy, and felt a chill. As it was already 11:30 p.m., I decided to turn in. Since my grandma had just moved in, the furniture hadn't come in yet and we were sleeping on a mattress in the living room. At that point both my grandma and brother were asleep, so after washing up, I lied down on the mattress to sleep. Just as I lay down, I heard a woman scream for about 2 to 3 seconds on the second floor. There was no one else except for the 3 of us in the neighborhood, let alone the house. I kept peeking to see if anyone/anything would come down the stairs, but after that nothing happened. I only fell asleep after 6 a.m. once it got brighter outside. When I was around 4 years old, I was in my room after supper. I wasn't asleep yet. This comes through my window, settles and takes the form of a pink rhino. He looks at me and says, "It's too late now." Very slowly. I remember the sheer panic, and only barely managed to yell for my parents. It then said, "It's too late now for your parents to help you." It then turned into mist form again, and goes out the window. I then screamed and ran into the living room where my parents were. My mom still remembers this. She said the eeriest part was that I had not seen a rhino before. It was only after describing it she got a book and I showed her. I can still remember it clearly and the intense fear I had. When I was 4, my great-grandmother died and my father inherited her house. We immediately moved in, as my parents were having financial problems and needed no mortgage to worry about. The house was built in the early 1900s and very creaky and quirky. Fast forward several years. My sister was 16-ish, which would have made me 10. She was in the den and heard my mother, who was upstairs, come down the stairs, walk down the hall, go out the porch door, out the back door, immediately come back in the back door, in the porch door, walk back down the hall, and return up the stairs. Baffled, my sister went upstairs to find out what in the world my mom was doing. Mom was in her bedroom, on the phone, and had been for the past 20 minutes. No one else was home. Another time, my oldest sister was living back at home with us while her husband was away working. Her son, my nephew, was about 20 months old, and had begun not only walking, but running. She was in the aforementioned den watching TV after she had put him down for the night. She heard the distinct sound of little feet running across the floor and went, "Shit, he's gotten up and is playing." So she went to get him and put him back to bed. He was sound asleep in the bassinet. We lived in that house for many years and it creeped me out, but I still miss it. I was on a camping trip with my friends, 3 of us. Towards the end of the day, we found a sweet spot, along a ridgeline, to harbor for the night. 2 of us has a tent while my other friend had a hammock and some ground sheets as shelter. He likes it that way. At around 2 to 3 a.m., it was pouring heavily and I was a little concerned with my friend and started calling out for him, wanting him to come into my tent for shelter. I yelled numerous times but to no response. Thinking that the rain must have drowned out my calls, I got out of my tent and went out to him. When I reached him, he looked terrified. I asked if he wanted to come into my tent for shelter. He turned it down. He insisted on staying put at where he was. Puzzled, I went back to my tent and slept. The next day, I sensed that something was amiss and my instinct told me not to question. We continued with the trip for another night. After the trip and settled down, I asked my friend about what had happened that night. This is what he told me. "It was pouring and I heard you calling for me. I walked over and saw that both of you were inside. Thinking that I must have misheard, I went back to my hammock. And when I heard the voice again, I knew it wasn't a voice in my head. I shouted back, thinking that it was one of you guys, but the voice kept calling for my name. I went back again, only to find the both of you sleeping. And this time, more and more voices are calling out for my name. And when you came over, I was totally freaked out. This is going to get lost since I'm a little late to the party, but here goes. We moved into our house about 10 months ago. A couple weeks after we moved in, this other family bought the house across the cul-de-sac from us, a mom, grandpa and boy that's maybe 3 or 4 years old. This kid is super creepy. He never smiles, he'll just stand in shadow and stare out into space, and just gives us all the creeps. He has this old red tricycle that squeaks eerily as he rides it, and he rides it fairly regularly in circles around our cul-de-sac. The other night, I couldn't sleep, everyone else in house was sleeping, probably around 1:30 a.m, so I step out onto my front porch to smoke a cigarette. I sit down and start reading Reddit on my phone when I hear the familiar creak of the tricycle. So I stand up from my spot on my porch and glance around. The sound stops. I'm a little creeped out, but I continue standing, reading and smoking. And I hear it again. Again, I look around, all the houses are dark, the only lights being a street lamp and our house lights. I still can't see anything that could possibly make that noise other than creepy kid's tricycle. This happens for the rest of my cigarette and I book it back in the house. I still don't know what was making that noise. There is no way this kid was outside riding his trike at that hour. There was no one around and I haven't been out that late to smoke since.